The 2013 documentary Blackfish, which centers around the untimely death of SeaWorld trainer Dawn Brancheau, as well as the life of Tilikum, the orca responsible, changed the public's opinion on the infamous water park almost immediately after its release. Suddenly, trust in SeaWorld was next to nothing, and what was once one of America's most popular tourist attractions had become a symbol for inhumanity. The general consensus had been rewritten. Keeping wild animals in captivity not only makes them violent, but is ultimately unethical. Blackfish interviews former SeaWorld employees, as well as some of Tilikum's other former handlers, to create a seemingly well-rounded board of individuals with which to drive home its thesis. The success of the film exemplifies director Coperthwaite's intent. Through the use of pathos, a compelling score, and suspenseful editing techniques, Blackfish presents an argument against SeaWorld and other whale-possessing aquariums that, while technically supported, is not as black and white as it may seem. The most prominent technique utilized in Blackfish is pathos, or the use of emotion to persuade an audience. Throughout the documentary, countless statements are made by the interviewees that imply the whales possess a certain humanity.
When you look into their eyes, you know somebody is home. Somebody's looking back. You form a very personal relationship with your animal.
The documentary goes on to show testimonials of former trainers who discuss the relationships formed with their animals.
Been with this whale since I was 18 years old, and I've seen her have all 4 babies. We've grown up together.
Coperthwaite's ultimate goal here is to manipulate the audience into resonating with the whales by anthropomorphizing their interactions with humans. Though this technique is highly effective, it isn't exactly the truth. In the book, Animals in Person, Cultural Perspectives on Human-Animal Intimacies, social anthropology professor Kay Milton writes that human engagements with animals begin not from a state of ontological separation, but from a state of pre-existing interconnection. Milton further criticizes the use of anthropomorphism as a way of assessing animals, claiming that it assumes humanness as the base for understanding all living creatures. So while whales may feel emotions, they are not the same emotions that humans experience, and should not be valued as such. Another instance of pathos within Blackfish can be found within the film's score. Music has invoked emotion in listeners since its invention, and this has only been furthered since the birth of film. In the book, This Is Your Brain on Music, The Science of a Human Obsession, author Daniel J. Levitin writes about the psychological research of this, saying, at a deeper level, the emotions we experience in response to music involve structures deep in the primitive reptilian regions of the cerebellovermis and the amygdala, the heart of emotional processing in the cortex. The music in Blackfish is often somber, adding tension and motivating the audience to feel more emotional. This triggers the idea of anthropomorphism once more, implying that the music reflects the perceived feelings of the whales. Outside of this, we also hear sounds of whales screaming in a scene where former hunter John Crow describes capturing a young Tilikum and removing him from his mother.
It's the worst thing I can think of. I can't think of anything worse than that. I lost it. I started crying. I didn't stop working, but
The focus on the horrific details of Tilikum's capture, as well as the horrors of whale catching as a whole, shock the viewer, influence feelings of despair, and immediately poison the mind against SeaWorld and all affiliates. There are countless instances of this in Blackfish, including footage of the crudely sized pool the whales were kept in at Sea Land in British Columbia, and recounts of the abuse Tilikum suffered from the other whales due to punishment techniques employed at Sea Land. Despite being the precursor to SeaWorld and not having anything to do with Tilikum's treatment in Florida or the issues that occurred there, Sealand serves as Tilikum's first encounter with captivity and as our first glimpse of those interactions. These specific scenes occur less than 20 minutes into the documentary and set the viewer up to have a bias against whale aquariums. Another extremely effective tool employed by Coperthwaite and her team is their use of suspenseful editing techniques. The organization of clips, music, and title cards set the tone for the documentary, really driving home the ticking time bomb notion of the whales. Here's an example. Observe the documentary's opening sequence and how it is meant to unsettle the audience. A timestamp, a location, and murky, empty water, alongside a few of the film's credits. The audio is harrowing, the fear in the caller's voice evident. Suddenly, the vast open space is replaced with varying shots of whales, interspersed with shots of humans underwater. The tension is clear. The final line of the phone call, "A whale ate one of the trainers," is heard, and we see a whale begin to nose a trainer.
A whale has eaten one of the trainers.
We're prepared for the worst, looking through our fingers at what we assume is going to be a grisly murder. Only to be pleasantly surprised. In his book, Film and Suspense, author Alton Locher writes, "High suspense in the cinema is inseparable from specific fears because it is generated by guilt-causing conflicts and the resulting free-floating anxiety." Though he is referring to the manufactured suspense in fictional films, this statement could not hit Coperthwaite's intent for Blackfish on the nose anymore. The knowledge that Don's death was an unfortunate consequence of the circus-like exploitation of whales society had grown accustomed to incites a guilt in the viewer, particularly in those who have attended SeaWorld and SeaWorld-like parks. And yet, the viewer stays, be it out of aforementioned guilt or the oh-so-human desire for spectacle, no matter how horrifying. This is not to say that Blackfish's intent is necessarily wrong. Coperthwaite, and everyone involved in the documentary, make some solid points about the ethics of animals in captivity and whether or not this addiction to spectacle is worth the pain it can cause nature. Former SeaWorld employee John Hargrove, who was not interviewed for the documentary, comments on this in his book Beneath the Surface, Killer Whales, SeaWorld, and the Truth Beyond Blackfish, writing, "It was unsettling because our experiences were just a part of a rapacious corporate scheme that exploited both the orcas and their human trainers. However, the undeniable bias and manipulative presentation chip away at Blackfish's credibility and remind the audience that there are two sides to everything. As easy as it would be to name SeaWorld and its trainers as villains, perhaps we, the audience, are the villains, engaging in what we think is helpful, but is actually just another form of, as Hargrove puts it, exploitation." Could our complicity as consumers be just as unethical as the act of keeping orcas in captivity? Though Blackfish argues against SeaWorld and other attraction-based aquariums, it appears to gloss over the fact that these organizations are not autonomous. The morbid fascination with exploitative exhibits and content fuels places like SeaWorld, and documentaries like Blackfish capitalize on this. Blackfish appeals heavily to the feelings of its audience, attempting to persuade viewers of its validity by using emotional interviews, poignant music, and suspenseful editing techniques. Though it strives to express the perceived inhumanity of SeaWorld's facilities, it does so unfairly by relying much more heavily on emotion than on fact. Blackfish opened the eyes of millions who were unaware that unethical practices can even occur in these parks, but ultimately, it's up to the viewer to decide how to move forward.